Good morning and welcome everyone to online worship at Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Abhi Janamanchi. My pronouns are he, him, one of the ministers serving this religious community. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are joining us from, whatever your beliefs, gender identity and expression, immigration status, or life circumstance, we welcome you to worship this morning. If you're joining us for the first time today, please let us know in the live chat. If you're new or feeling new, you're invited to complete the newcomer form that will be linked here in the chat. And if you're interested in joining this religious community as a member, please reach out to my colleague, Reverend Katie, at Romano-Griffin at cedarlane.org. We would love to have you join this movement. Our pastoral visitors are an extension of the caring ministry that we aspire to and provide at Cedar Lane. Joanne Jersey is today's pastoral visitor, and she is available in the live chat today to support you. Thank you, Joanne, for your ministry. Next Sunday, we will be celebrating our annual flower communion service, and we would like to include a photo slideshow of members of our community with flowers, families and individuals of all ages. So please send your photos to Sandy Dossie, and the email is in the chat, by June 10th. We hope to have many of these pictures in the service next week. Immediately following that service, the annual congregational meeting of the membership will be held at 1 p.m. via Zoom. And this year, our church business includes approval of the annual budget, the election of members to the Board of Trustees and the nominating committee, bylaw changes to allow increased use of our endowment fund to cover the deficit, and a board proposal to approve Dr. Henry Sigrishi as Director of Music Emeritus. I hope all of our members will plan on joining us next Sunday at 1 p.m. And today, we are resuming our annual fund campaign that we paused in early March after the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And we are resuming it for 30 days today, starting today. The goal of the campaign was $900,000. And thanks to many of you, the campaign to date has raised $675,000. Thank you to all those who have made a commitment to support your religious home. Now, over the next 30 days, I hope that every member and friend will make or increase your pledge, because the year ahead is going to be more than challenging. And when the gap is greater, our generosity needs to be greater. Now, during this pandemic, it is natural for us to focus on what we have lost or what we are missing. And for some of us, that is all we can do right now. But for just a few moments, I would like you to focus on what we have gained in this time. We've gained an even deeper understanding that no matter how much we value, love, and miss our beautiful church building and campus, we value and love and miss each other so much more. For us, church is a source of grounding, strength, inspiration, and our deep connections to one another. From our most senior members to our youngest children, from our dedicated staff to our many newcomers and new members. Over the past 3 months, I have been deeply moved by how we have increased our services and our generosity to the larger community during this pandemic. I'm inspired by all those who have stepped up to keep us connected as a religious community, reaching out to almost every member and friend in our Cedar Lane community. And I'm profoundly heartened by how staff and congregants are partnering to create and share vital ministries to tend to the social, spiritual, emotional, material, and prophetic needs of our people and the larger community. So we have 30 days to raise $125,000. We can do so much with your support, even more than our initial challenge. I hope you will choose to be a part of this amazing outpouring of support that we have been receiving from both UUs who are members of Cedar Lane and from all over. Thank you for supporting Cedar Lane in our work to equip each other, support our leaders, and advance our UU values and convictions in this profound and prophetic time. And so, if you have not done so already, please make your pledge today online or mail in your pledge and your check, if you'd like, to the church. Let us all do our part to make our mission possible.
Thank you. I'm Tim Atkins, your Director of Religious Education, and my pronouns are he, him. So there's something different this time. This week has been, there are no really easy words to describe what this week has been like, are there? So for those who don't know my age all that well, I'm 38. High school class of 2000, and the oldest age in the millennial generation. And I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime, where neighborhoods are having pop-up protests organized on the fly, where suburban moms are chanting defund the police, where 4 teenage girls plan a march on the fly in Louisville that draws 10,000 people to it. Where day after day, every damn day, there's a new video of police brutally suppressing peaceful protests. And even my mom, bless her heart, has become a political radical on Twitter. And I honestly have no idea how that happened, but I love it. There's just something happening here. I'm seeing my entire generation and the amazing Generation Z that comes after becoming totally radicalized and embracing the call to protest and calling to shut it down until we shut racism down. I've never seen anything like Monday night in our country, where the president orders armed guards from who really knows where to clear out a totally peaceful protest in front of the White House, just so he can have the world's worst photo op at a church when asked if he was holding his Bible, he replied that he was holding a Bible. You know, that did it for me. That was what tipped the balance for me in trying to decide if I should go to a protest versus stay at home for fear of COVID. I realized then that, well, my soul was just being too damaged by staying at home. I went to DC on Wednesday along with Reverend Abhi and Stephanie Williams, and we participated in a protest at the Capitol. And no offense to Abhi. He was one of the oldest folks there. Heck, I was one of the oldest folks there. Because there's something happening here. So many of these protests are being planned by millennials and Gen Z. Students are leading thousands in demands for justice, and they are changing the world as we know it. After this week, I can't really imagine the world going back to how it was. Can you? There's just something happening here. Which is why we're talking about it this week and needed to interrupt our regularly scheduled programming. How can we do business as usual when there is no more usual? Today, our service will be focused on George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many more whose names we know and names we might never know. So today, you're in for some work this morning, and you're in for some healing this morning. There will be times that you are uncomfortable, and I challenge you to embrace it, own it. Because however much we're uncomfortable, it will never compare to a knee on our neck for 8.5 minutes. There will be times when we call for action and even post in the chat some things that you can do. And don't just say you're going to do them, actually do them. And then come back and tell us in the chat that you did them. And after our service of reflection, we will move into a space for healing. And you'll hear more about that later on in the service. We have to embrace this as a call to wake up. The one thing we must absolutely refuse to do as Unitarian Universalists is sleep through the revolution. Let our worship begin.
There is a prayer in the gasp. I've lost my breath 1,000,000 times in this lifetime. The car accident, the water, drank too fast, chasing people and love and dreams. Underwater in the pool with my cousins, we held our breath and counted to see who could stay under the longest. It's one thing to manipulate breath yourself. It is another to have it taken. There is a prayer in the sigh. I've sighed 1,000,000 times in this lifetime. At being disappointed, being fired, at losing something important and someone important, and myself. I could not breathe when my grandmother traded in, gasping for rest. I've held the smallest of hands that belonged to the smallest of lungs and sang a lullaby as breath betrayed dreams of motherhood. How could something so important as breath be so fragile? I hold my breath as I consume the news. The virus takes over your lungs, and I cannot imagine what it must be like to drown within yourself, even I. Seems there's a prayer in the breath.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Williams, and I am our worship associate for this service. My pronouns are she, her. While we light this chalice, I invite you to share in the chat where you are lighting your chalice by saying this chalice is lit in blank. So for example, this chalice is lit in College Park, Maryland. On this strange Sunday, we gathered together, linked to each other through invisible bonds of caring and love, sharing with millions the grief, anger, and uncertainty of this time. In this time together, may each of us find our ground of strength and commitment. May each of us let our hearts break open to new ways of caring for our neighbor as ourselves. May each of us know, even if we are alone, that we are held in a great embrace of love. In this spirit, we light our chalice. In the past week, I have participated in multiple protests, both in Maryland and DC, for Black Lives Matter. And I want to start by prefacing that I am a white protester, and if my perspective on these events is the only one that you're hearing, then you need to fix that. If I am the only person that you know who has gone to a protest, you need to think critically about your social circles. I am also gearing the following message primarily to white people because I have no authority on how Black people or people of color in general should be interacting with current events. That being said, I want to thank everyone who has been supporting my activism with kind words and direct donations and supplies of food for me to carry into the city and donating to Black Lives Matter causes. These are great ways to help support from the protection of your own home, and I am thankful for all of the privileges that have allowed me to be an activist in this time. I am white and young, in good health. I live alone in case I need to quarantine. My jobs are secure, and I know I have legal aid if needed. I know that my protesting will never result in my disenfranchisement or my death. And many protesters are not that lucky. That being said, I am exhausted. I am worn and tired. I have screamed my throat raw and chased by police on horses. I have been harassed both in person and online for using my First Amendment rights. I am sore and emotionally drained. I have physically put my body in between soldiers and Black protesters, and this is still nothing compared to what Black Americans face daily. So I wear this exhaustion with pride. But I am also deeply aggravated. I am angry at my white peers and their excuses. There are many ways to support the movement right now, and yet somehow people don't. I am angry at the suggestions for white people to read and watch things to educate themselves on racism. We are past reading, and watching a movie about slavery does nothing but quell your own guilt. And I am tired of the performative things that I have seen. At some point, we need to actually live our values. It is not enough to be non-racist. It is not enough to say you are anti-racist. You need to actually put action behind those words, or else these are not your lived values. They're just nice sentiments that ease your conscience. Now is not the time for passive activism, but progressive action. And this requires us to look deep within ourselves to find what we are willing to sacrifice to live our values. You might be worried about getting hurt. And as white people, I beg you to realize that you are not the one that might die here. And your Black siblings are dying every single day. Is your comfort zone more important? Of the multiple protests that I have been to, only one has turned violent. And that was a result of the armed police officers and military that were there. But you will be safe. You need to be seen. I have been thanked for going to every single event I have been to, but I shouldn't be. I shouldn't be one of the only white people showing up. I shouldn't be the only one you know protesting, and I shouldn't be the only voice that you're hearing. You may be thinking, I'm scared. We're all scared. Every person who is protesting is scared, but only some of us have the option to avoid that fear. And we are all there so that others don't have to live with that every single day. So please, I need you to think about the reasons that you aren't going to protest. Write them down, read them aloud, and ask yourself, is this reason more important than Black lives? Take time to imagine yourself actually going to a protest, what it would look like, and realize how possible it is for you. And hopefully do it. Show up for your fellow Americans. Show up for the people who need it, who need you there specifically. So thank you for your support today, and thank you for this platform to share my experiences and my feelings, but I really don't just want you to listen. I want you to think critically about what you need to do to change, and I am begging you to act. For all those who, up until a few months ago, were blasting the songs of protest from the musical Hamilton, I need you to be aware. This is your shot. History is watching you right now. What are you going to do? Thank you.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. A long ways from home, a long ways from home. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. A long ways. A long ways. From
The words I'm about to read are from the Reverend Dr. William Barber. He is the co-leader of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. He is speaking to this moment while also building a movement of people to change the moral narrative of this country. He said in a letter recently, like many of you, I have heard George Floyd cry, "I can't breathe." And Mama, I love you, on the recording of his lynching in the streets of Minneapolis. I have watched as crowds of people, Black, white, and brown, gay, straight, and trans, have taken to those same streets to cry out against systemic racism. The image of a white officer choking the life out of a Black man while fellow officers looked on is viscerally reminiscent of the lynching photographs that were used to terrorize African Americans for decades in this nation. Protesters are right to decry such brutal and inhumane treatment as racism. Thank God people are in the street, refusing to accept what has been seen as normal for far too long. What a shame it would have been if this nation could watch a policeman murder another human being and then pose like a hunter with his prey while his colleagues looked on, and there not be a protest, anguish, anger, outrage, and moral disruption. All that is needed to understand why Black people are crying out is to ask what the response our justice system would have had there been a video that emerged of 4 Black men doing that to a white man. We all know what racism looks like. But the lethal violence of racist officers is only one manifestation of the systemic racism that is choking the life out of American democracy.
Something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I got to beware. It's time to stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds. There ain't so much resistance from behind. It's time to stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street, singing songs and carrying signs. Mostly say hooray for our side. It's time to stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Paranoia strikes deep into your life and will creep. It starts when you're always afraid. Step out of line, the man come and take you away. We better stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Now, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Injustice, period, is causing many to question whether this nation's commitment to the establishment of justice means anything at all. George Floyd's murder would have been enough alone, but it comes after the compounded death and deadliness of a pandemic that has wreaked havoc on poor and low-income communities across the nation. More than 100,000 people have said, "I can't breathe," as this disease choked them to death. The coronavirus has spread through the fissures of our society, exposing the inequalities we've long accepted, like a contrast dye in our body politic. We must be clear, however, long before COVID-19 came to our shores, 140 million Americans were poor and low income. 700 people were dying a day from poverty in this nation before we declared a national emergency. Last week, Columbia University published a study that said many of the 100,000 Americans we've lost did not have to die. And these numbers of those who've died from the coronavirus, of those who've died from poverty too, are disproportionately people of color. So you see, this moment demands that all who care about the American experiment in democracy listen closely and listen deeply to the uprising that is itself a collective gasp for life.
Deep in the shadow of night, down near the crossroads and cemetery gates, with bitter liquor and cigar smoke wafting, I greet you. Clad in white upon the floor before shrines, following the names of the ancestors being uttered, I greet you. You are the sacred and righteous rage of my people. Echoing throughout time from the lands of our elders, from the depths of the ocean, I hear you now. You call out to us in the swirling winds, and the clamoring of lightning, and the crashing of waves, and the flow of rivers, and the rustling of forests, and the clouds that move across the heavens, and the drumbeat of the earth. You are present in the cries of Black Lives Matter and no justice, no peace. You shimmer brightly in the flames of buildings crumbling to the ground as they are consumed in flame. In the calls for protests and direct action. In the stirring of pots, the laughter of children, and the tears and prayers of our guardians. You are Black rage. Holy and sacred, unbound and unapologetic. You swell in the hips and breasts, in the curves of cheekbones and nostrils, in the beats of the heart and pulsating thoughts, in exhaustion, in frustration, in numbness and mobilization, in life. And you name yourself as good. Holy and sacred Black rage. Be ever present in our struggle for liberation, in our work to be, to love, to exist. Guide our movements in all of their forms as we strive to be good ancestors, ensuring that our descendants might look upon our memory with favor. For you, for them, invite us to live without fear. Dear holy and sacred Black rage, give life to this valley of dry bones. Move like fire upon our spirits. Stir within us now and forevermore. Ashe, so be it, and amen.
Each Sunday, we take up an offering to support the mission and ministry of Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. The offering is an invitation to demonstrate willingly a commitment to the common principles and convictions expressed in our Unitarian Universalist faith. Our offering reminds us that our congregation belongs to each of us, individually as well as to the whole of us, and that our ministry is more than just the building. It is an extension of our gratitude for our spiritual home, where we are welcomed to be who we are, as we are, and to bless each other and the world with our gifts. Today, our offering will be shared between Black Lives Matter DC and Freedom Fighters DC. The mission of Freedom Fighters DC is to ensure justice for all Black Americans who have been constantly oppressed by systemic racism that is present in the United States of America. They organized the June 3rd protest at the Capitol that Abhi and Tim and many other Cedar Laners attended. They are raising funds to provide financial assistance for protest-related emergency medical and legal needs to the residents of the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia. Black Lives Matter DC is a radical collective of Black artists, infrastructure builders, and movement healers and strategists from the future, organizing in the here and now. Black Lives Matter DC aspires to live as our highest selves while dismantling white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, imperialism, and the role that the state plays in supporting those corrupt systems. You can give to these organizations right now by electronic means of the modern era, text, online giving, PayPal, QR code, or you can give to them using the ancient spiritual practice of mailing a check to the church. As David Meredith sings, "Easy to be hard," the online offering to support Black Lives Matter DC and Freedom Fighters DC will now be joyfully given and gratefully received. Thank you for your generosity and support.
Easy to be hard. How can people be so heartless? How can people be so cruel? Easy to be hard. How can people have no feelings? How can they ignore their friends? Easy to be proud, easy to say no. Especially people who care about strangers, really care about social justice. Do you only care about the being crowd? How about I need a friend? I need a friend. How can people be so heartless? You know I'm hung up on you. Easy to be proud, to say no. Especially people who care about strangers, who really care about social justice. Do you only care about the being crowd? How about I need a friend? We all need a proud, easy to say no, easy to be cold, easy to say no, much too easy to give in, easy to say no, 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 no. To say no.
We gather each week to bear witness to our joys and sorrows as companions on life's journey. If you normally light a candle of intention in the sanctuary, I invite you to light one at home and or share it in the live chat during this ritual. Within our Cedar Lane community, we celebrate with Doña Rosa, Maria Salome, Juan Pablo, and John. Doña Rosa received a temporary 60-day stay of removal from ICE last week. We celebrate with Perry and Diane Seifert the birth of granddaughter Clara Evelyn Seifert on May 26th. Clara is the first girl born in the extended Seifert clan in 74 years. We rejoice with Kathleen Reedy, who celebrates the birth of her second great-grandson, Joseph Marco, in Charlotte, North Carolina. We hold the Boyle family in our hearts as they mourn the loss of their beloved canine companion, Diego. We hold in our hearts the Strang family as we mourn with them the loss of longtime beloved member Helen Strang, who was a warrior for justice and equality. We hold in our hearts the Garland family as they navigate the loss of Chris's father, Charlie. Our caring extends beyond the Cedar Lane community to all those whose lives are taken or impacted by violence and calamities in our world. Especially this week, we hold the people of El Salvador and Guatemala in our hearts as they recover from a devastating tropical storm that killed 17 people and caused widespread damage. We hold in our hearts the over 401,600 people globally, including more than the 111,000 people in the US who have died from COVID-19 and their loved ones. We hold in our hearts and say the names of George Floyd and other victims of vigilante and extrajudicial killings: Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, who would have turned 27 on Friday, Tony McDade, Finan Burhay, David McAtee. We hold their families, friends, and the hundreds of thousands who are rising up in anguish, anger, lamentation, and protest in our hearts. Holding them, holding all the joys and sorrows we bring, let us join our hearts and minds now in Tonglen practice. Tonglen is an ancient healing practice in Tibetan Buddhism that cultivates fearlessness and compassion in the face of suffering. Also known as taking and sending, Tonglen reverses our usual logic of avoiding suffering and seeking pleasure. People's pain brings up our fear or anger. It brings up our resistance and confusion and our discomfort. Tonglen is a way of connecting with the pain that we cannot change or fix. In Tonglen practice, one breathes that person or thing into the heart with kindness instead of avoiding it, and then breathes out the fear and resistance. Tonglen requires something challenging but actually liberating. Unmitigated honesty with compassion. So to begin the practice, I invite you now to close your eyes and let your mind and body settle into the space. Aware of breathing in, aware of breathing out, aware of our body releasing tensions, aware of our mind easing worry, aware of our heart opening our heart, aware of our emotions, our feelings, anxiety, fear, agitation, anger, resistance, or happiness. Without judging or trying to change these feelings or emotions in any way, just be with them with a sense of acceptance and kindness toward all that is felt. Imagine that there is a metal sheath around your heart. This metal sheath is everything about us that is difficult for us to accept. Our self-importance, selfishness, self-righteousness, self-pity, self-criticism. It is the band of fear that hardens our heart. I invite us to bring awareness to this fear with a sense of acceptance and non-judgment, like a friend being quietly present to a friend with kindness, compassion, and spaciousness. Try to do this by visualizing the metal sheath breaking apart when the in-breath of suffering touches it. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in the heavy, hot smoke of suffering and breathe out sympathetic space. As you breathe in suffering, own it, hold it. Notice the suffering of the privileged, guilt, shame, disconnect, discomfort. Feel the energy, hold the energy, hold in compassion, and then with the out breath, release, ease, send relief. Notice your own suffering of injustice. Be aware. Notice how it manifests in your body, in your emotions. Breathe in this suffering in compassion. Hold it, own it, and breathe out with clarity and surrender, relief and kindness. Now notice the suffering of those who are oppressed, those whose breath and lives are choked out. Try to see specifics. Feel in your body, your emotions. Hold in compassion. Send ease and relief in your mind. Let the in-breath of suffering touch the metal sheath of self-centeredness around your heart. Let it break apart and open your heart to the suffering. Let the hot smoke vanish into the great space of your heart. Let the power of this compassion join with that of your neighbors. with all who are with you in this moment out into the world. With an out breath, send a deep, cool, and spacious healing breath into the world. Let the out breath flow through every pore of your body. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. I invite us now to sit, stand, or take a knee in silence and solidarity for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in honor of the time George Floyd had the literal knee of the state on his neck. Let us enter the silence together. coming from the awareness of this time, what are your deepest intentions for addressing the suffering of systemic racism? What commitments are you willing to make? What are you carrying forth from this time? What actions are you committing to take? Don, can we play the song?
Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground. Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground. Oh, don't you want to go on that gospel feast? That promised land where all is peace. Oh, deep, deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground.
Thank you, Rachel, for that beautiful, soulful rendition of Deep River. On May 18th, 1966, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered the Ware Lecture at the UUA General Assembly in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. In his lecture, Dr. King recounted the story of Rip Van Winkle, who went to sleep during the reign of King George III and woke up 20 years later when George Washington was president. Dr. King said, "The most striking thing about the story of Rip Van Winkle is not merely that Rip slept 20 years, but that he slept through a revolution. While he was peacefully snoring up the mountain, a revolution was taking place that would change the course of history, and Rip knew nothing about it. He was asleep. And one of the great liabilities of life, King continues, is that all too many people find themselves living amid a great period of social change, and yet they fail to develop the new attitudes, the new mental responses that the new situation demands. There is nothing more tragic than sleeping through a revolution. So last week, I joined thousands of people in Washington, D.C. and in Rockville in protests incited by the killing of George Floyd and the ensuing outrage over police brutality. I was with people from different racial and ethnic groups, religious and spiritual backgrounds, sexual orientation and gender identities, social and economic backgrounds, and all ages, marching together to transform this nation from what it is to what it should be. And I was witness to so many powerful moments. Witness to a situation where young Black protesters called on Capitol Police, who were standing guard in front of the US Capitol, to take a knee in solidarity. And one by one, Black and white officers took a knee. I was witness to a conversation with the chief of Capitol Police, Chief's son, who had to be schooled about the history of policing in our country, of how it originated from slave patrols when he refused to come and meet with the organizers of the protests, and kept trying to tell me that Congress was there and that he and his police were there to protect Congress. And when I reminded him that Congress was there to serve us because we elected those people to Congress and therefore they are here to serve and protect us, he walked away. I was there at St. John's Episcopal Church praying with other clergy and joining protesters, kneeling with them and singing, "We Shall Overcome," and ending it with, "We will not be afraid today." And I was there witnessing to the National Guard and the Army and the Secret Service and the Department of Prisons joining together, marching towards the White House and then settling down on the Lafayette ellipse, protecting a coward and a tyrant who had enclosed himself in a cage, getting the wall that he's always wanted. These and many other instances have spurred me to action, to move out of my self-enclosed quarantine, to move out of my fear about this temporary epidemic, to actually be present to and engage with this ongoing epidemic, this pandemic that we have been witnessing to for 401 years in our country. What we are seeing today is the revival of a sacred revolution that began generations ago. All over the country, in big cities and small towns and inner cities and suburbs, hundreds of thousands of people, Black people, people of color, and huge numbers of white people that I have never seen before in any of the protests and marches I've been a part of. People who are suffering from the chronic racial injustice fatigue, or demonstrating peacefully in the streets despite the pandemic, protesting, shouting, "No justice, no peace, Black Lives Matter, I can't breathe." Say their name, demanding an end to police brutality and the dismantling of structures that keep Black lives in jeopardy. And around the world, tens of thousands are demonstrating in support of Black Lives Matter in the US, while also denouncing racism in their own countries. People are, as civil rights leader Miss Fannie Lou Hamer said, sick and tired of being sick and tired. So what about us, friends? Are we awake, or are we going to sleep through this revolution? And if we are awake, not woke, but awake, what are we willing to do? What does it mean now to be a community where love works? You see, love works when we are not afraid of the stranger, that we see our family in the stranger. That means Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Tony McDade, Breonna Taylor, Finan Burhay, David McAtee, and every Black person who was killed or is suffering, sick, poor, or dying is our sibling, is our family. Love works when we call out the centrality of anti-Black and systemic racism in our country. It means reaching out to our Black brothers, sisters, and siblings, letting them know that we are willing to witness to their grief, their rage, their fear, their pain, their hopelessness, and their despair, that we will no longer be silent, we will no longer be afraid, we will no longer be cocooned in our privilege. That though we can never fully understand what it means to be Black in this country, we are going to be sitting and marching with them, letting them know that they are not alone, that they do not have to carry this burden alone, not anymore. Grieving with others will teach us how to fight with them. And for those of us who are people of color, love works means to channel our fear and our rage into courageous love. Because our rage, as Valerie Kaur puts it, carries essential information. It returns us to our body's ability to fight for our lives and the lives of others. The key, she says, is to process our rage in safe containers that don't harm us or others. That means to be with our people, to shake, to cry, to run, to scream, to rant, to breathe. And then stepping into the role of translating the raw, reactionary rage in the street to those who cannot understand it, by helping our country understand the pain of those whose cries have fallen on deaf ears for so long. And for those of you who are white identified, love works means not being satisfied that you are not a racist. Because as Dr. Ibram Kendi points out, the opposite of racist is not racist, it is anti-racist. What's the difference? He says one endorses either the idea of a racial hierarchy as a racist or racial equality as an anti-racist. One either believes problems are rooted in groups of people as a racist, or locates the roots of problems in power and policies as an anti-racist. One either allows racial inequities to persevere as a racist, or confronts racial inequities as an anti-racist. There is no in-between safe and comfortable space of being not racist. There is no neutrality in the racism struggle. End of quote. Love works means being more than empathetic allies. It means being accomplices, co-conspirators with people of color to shatter the shackles of systemic racism and oppression. It means acknowledging that while systemic racism and white supremacy is not your fault, you have inherited a legacy that is intentionally designed to perfection, to benefit you, our country's economic, political, and social institutions that operate on the assumptions that Black lives do not matter. It means Black people and people of color cannot dismantle systemic racism, but you can. Love works means not being satisfied now that the police officers have been charged for George Floyd's murder, or that some police officers are taking a knee in solidarity with the protesters. It means those who killed Breonna Taylor are yet to be charged, and those who killed Tony McDade are yet to be named. It means we still do not have justice for the hundreds of thousands of others who have been killed from systemic racism, police violence, mass incarceration, health inequity, and poverty. It means recognizing, as the Reverend Al Sharpton said in his powerful eulogy at George Floyd's funeral on Thursday, that George Floyd's story has been the story of Black folks, because ever since 401 years ago, the reason we could never be who we wanted and dreamed to being is you kept your knee on our neck. It means recognizing that our communities are policed as war zones, that the police state is a living reality where curfews are customary and the National Guard and the Army marches in our streets, protects a coward. And every police force in our nation has unlimited supply of tear gas, riot gear, rubber bullets, while we still do not have enough PPEs. It means this is the time to make economic and structural demands on our government to end the multiple pandemics of systemic racism and poverty and militarism and ecological devastation and a distorted religious nationalism, and to end the militarized force that is used against people who just wanted to breathe. It means finding our voices to say enough, no more. It means aligning ourselves with voices that have for long been calling for demilitarizing the police and divesting from policing and incarceration and investing in programs that meet critical community needs. Schools, universal health care, and transformative forms of justice that truly keep our communities safe. Love works means love is not a feeling, a hallmark moment, or a hashtag moment, but a decision, not a privileged choice, but a moral imperative. It means staying engaged for the long haul. It means trusting that love is real and that love will guide us through the hard night. It means we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes for all people. It means not resting in comfort or ease until the day comes when all can breathe. So let us say yes to that love with the yes of our lives and our deeds. And to that I say, amen. And the people say, amen. Before we close, I'd like to thank everyone who helped make today's service a reality. Reverend Katie Romano-Griffin and Archine Turner, Dayna Edwards, Tim Atkins, Stephanie Williams, Doctors Henry Segrishi and Jasmine Lee, Rachel Moore, and Cedar Lane musician David Meredith. And thank you to our amazing AV team, Don Woodruff, Mike Morse, Todd Chernikov, and our visual arts team, Rebecca Nachtrieb and Sandy Dossie, for creating those beautiful in-gathering and service slides. And thank you to our membership coordinator, Roger Santo Domingo, and our pastoral visitor, Joanne Jersey, who have been active and engaged in our live chat. Today, after the service, instead of our regular coffee hour, we're going to have healing circles. The spectrum of needs and feelings that we are navigating through this time are vast. And to help us process both those feelings and be present to one another, we have created some identity-based groups, healing circles. So we hope you will join the circle that most closely matches your identity so that you may be sitting with and processing with someone who has a similar experience to yours. And I hope we will emerge from these circles doing the work of healing and ready to take action.
Our closing words from Elizabeth Alexander are inscribed at the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama. The wind brings your names. We will never dissever your names, nor shadows beneath each tree and branch. The truth comes on the wind, is carried by water. There is such a thing as the truth. Tell us how you got over. Say, soul, look back in wonder. Your names were never lost, each name a holy word. The rocks cry out, call out each name to sanctify this place. Sounds in human voices, silver or soil, a moan, a sorrow song, a keen, a cackle, harmony, a hymnal, handbook, chart, a sacred text, a stamp, an exhortation. Ancestors, you will find us still in cages, despised and disciplined. You will find us still misnamed. Here you will find us despite, you will not find us extinct. You will find us here memoried and storied. You will find us here mighty. You will find us here divine. You will find us here where you have left us, but not as you have left us. Here you endure and are luminous. You are not lost to us. The wind carries sorrow, sighs, and shouts. The wind brings everything. Nothing is lost.
You're broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can't find that fighter. But I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out and move mountains. We gon' walk it out and move mountains. And I'll rise like the day, I'll rise unafraid, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. And I'll rise up, high like the waves, I'll rise up, in spite of the ache, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you, for you. When the silence isn't quiet and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe, and I know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world to its feet and move mountains, bring it to its feet and move mountains. And I'll rise like the day, I'll rise up. I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you, for you. All we need is hope. And for that we have each other. And for that we have each other. We will rise, we will rise, we'll rise. Oh, we'll rise, we'll rise. I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I'll rise up 1,000 times again. And we'll rise up, high like the wave. We'll rise up, in spite of the ache. We'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you.